and he can give us lots of tips on our question of the night. He is Mike Siegel, and he joins us now. Hey, Mike.
Hi, Pete. Hey, is the Spanish Springsteen, is his nickname El Jefe?
Well, since I don't speak
That means
Spanish.
the Spanish for the boss. See,
Okay.
now it's lost on you. That's lost on you, Pete.
Listen, most American jokes are lost on me. I don't. You expect me to get like a bilingual joke? Mike was here last week. I kind of felt rushed. He's a very old friend. We've had
Long
a
time friend. Let's not call
long
it.
time friend. Yeah,
Let's say old friend, Pete. Come on.
I
We're
chose
very
my
young
words
people.
poorly. Yes, Mike is in his extremely late 20s. And we go back a long way. He's had a great experience in show business, and I felt like we were too rushed last week. We didn't get the stuff, so we'll just take our time tonight and talk to Mike a little bit. Great to have you back. Thanks for joining me, Mike. I know you're
It's always great to see you, and this was fun doing it. I'm sorry we got cut short last time, but now that you're talking about travel, you're right up my alley. As
I know. Why
host of
don't
the
we
Longtime Travel Tales podcast, where do you want to go? Where would you go, Pete, with the
why don't
unlimited
you know,
funds?
I'll tell you what, a couple of years ago, maybe actually 3 or 4 years ago, I was kind of like, what do I do? I missed California. I love living in Wisconsin, though. It's the people here are great. You get a lot for your money. We could talk about that too, because you hosted the
Yeah,
show.
right.
And Wisconsin's beautiful. I grew up part of my childhood in Chicago. I was like, where do I go now? Like, if I was up for a new adventure, and we talked about Portugal, because at the time it was considered kind of affordable, and I think, is it tropical, Mike? I don't know. I know it's right on the
No,
ocean.
I love Portugal. I've been there a couple times, and it's now, since COVID especially, it's been found out by expats.
Yeah.
It was it's like booming. So
Okay.
now it's not as easy. It's like it's California weather, basically. It's kind of dry. It's
Wow.
Mediterranean. So you're
Yeah.
right on the coast, and it can get cool at night, but it's never really that bad. But it's like the lifestyle of Spain or Italy and stuff. But immigrating there was a lot easier with a lot less red tape. And once that's been found out in the last 10 years, it's just prices have gone up. Getting in is a little bit harder now, but it's oh yeah, I love it, man. I could live there
Yeah.
very easily. If,
Okay.
yeah, it's very, very nice.
Is it, where's the new Portugal?
Um,
Place people haven't found yet.
well, if you look in like Central America and stuff, like Costa Rica's been found out. Panama is kind of booming now. That's kind of the next place where a lot of Americans are going to, other than this, Mexico and places like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably Panama. I guess, yeah, Costa Rica's again been found out a little bit. Nicaragua, even places like that. But then you run into kind of politics and things like
Right.
that. Croatia is also big. Medical tourism is very big. As Americans,
Oh,
when we
yeah.
don't
I've
get
heard that.
we don't get health insurance. So it's funny when you go to like Istanbul in Turkey, you see all these middle-aged guys walking around with head wraps on their head, like bandages. And I was like, what the hell's going on here? Was there a big street fight that I didn't know about? But
Did I miss a
turns out,
street fight?
yeah, turns out it's like the number one place for hair transplants
Oh,
around
really?
the world. So people come from around the world to get hair transplants in Istanbul. So you walk
What are
around
you doing?
downtown Istanbul and it's just guys with head bandages all over the place.
Lots of plugs.
Yeah, a
Uh,
lot of them. It's
that's pretty cool. What's the weather like in Croatia, though? Is that, if I'm going
uh,
anywhere, if I'm leaving Wisconsin, which doesn't look
again,
like,
it's
yeah.
Mediterranean, so it's beautiful. It's just right across.
Okay.
It's right next to Italy, and you're right on the sea there, and it's gorgeous.
So I
Um,
don't know if you heard this, Mike. 20 years from now, supposedly, the number one place to live in the world, given climate change, will be Michigan. Honest to God, I read, I think it was in the New York Times.
I've heard these things, yeah,
Yeah,
about fresh water.
right. And it's a beautiful state to begin with. Their coast is great
Yeah,
on all around the state. It's a big state. There's hills. It's very beautiful. I feel like we're next in line. Wisconsin, we're very similar to Michigan. Climate,
sure.
we've got fresh water. But 20 years from now, I'm going to be 141. I don't know if I want to wait that. No. Have you heard that? It's like, because we have fresh water here and we have to protect it. The PFAS are an issue in the Midwest, but Yeah, that could be kind of cool.
I have heard that, and Minnesota as well.
Yeah.
People are going up there. It's going to be interesting to see how it's going to change. You're already finding people that in places like Palm Springs, where I know your parents go to a lot. The
Yeah.
summers, it's just getting hotter and hotter and hotter. And we worry about fires out here. You remember
Sure.
California? Now there's a whole fire season. It wasn't too bad this year, but it's bad. I had friends who live in Sonoma up in wine country, and they finally had to leave because
Mm.
one they were tired of evacuating for like either smoke or actual fire came right to their door. So they just
Good.
like after a couple of years of that, she was just like, "Nope, I'm I'm done." But yeah, I
Wow.
don't know. I
Well,
mean, I just heard the weather before I got on here, and it was going to be what 45 this week
with the
in
amount of
like
days it's been 40 in January in Northeast Wisconsin is a little scary. I'm soaking it up, loving it. There's nothing I can do to change it, so I'm gonna enjoy it, but it is a little
right.
scary, you
Is
know?
there snow on the ground there now?
There is, just only because about 3 weeks ago, we got a really huge storm, but a lot of it's gone. I mean, it's been pretty
Yeah.
crazy. And
Well, we noticed.
Minnesota is nice,
Yeah.
but they're a bunch of copycatters. They like to do whatever Wisconsin does, so
Well,
we
we
don't.
noticed the difference in our lifetime, right? I mean, when
Oh, for sure.
I grew up in Chicago, and I remember them snow being on the ground at least like all winter long. At least in
Right.
different levels, but there was always something on the ground. And now I've gone back in February the last 10 years or so, and nothing on the ground. And it's still cold, but it just maybe get a snow and then it melts away within a week, and it's very strange. I had friends with snowmobiles, and they got rid of them after a while because they just weren't using them.
Wow. Yeah, it's strange. I've noticed just since I've been back here, 12 years ago, came back and it was frigid. There's a certain amount of time during in January and February where it's like 0, 10. Those were the highs. And I said to my parents, "Was it always this cold? Like, I don't remember it being this cold." And they said, "Yeah." So I had been gone for what, 15 years or whatever, and I got used to it when I got back, but that was just 12 years ago. I don't think we've had a winter like that in 6 or 7 years. So it's changed just in the last decade, I would say.
No, I've been scuba
Um,
diving for the last 30 years, and what I've seen around the world of the reefs, it's sad. It's really sad. So, like a lot of my new travels coming up, in the last few years have been about kind of like seeing nature when I could, because I've seen a lot of it disappear. The reefs bleaching and that kind of stuff. So, the water temperature's rising a little bit. It just throws the whole
yeah.
ecosystem off. So it's just yeah, it's kind of sad, but see nature while you can, Pete. That's all I'm
Yeah.
saying.
No, I will. My guest is Mike Siegel. He is the host of What You Get for the Money, If Walls Could Talk. He hosted Movie Break on TBS. There's pretty much not a show he hasn't hosted. Um, so where would you go, Mike? You've been all over the place. I've seen the map you have in your office with all the thumbtacks you
Yeah.
have all over the world, and I'm like, you don't even. Where
I
haven't
st-
you been, and where do you want to go?
I still have about a like right before COVID, I had about a dirty dozen list of countries that I still haven't been to. Um, Egypt is a big one that I still haven't been to.
Oh,
Egypt and Morocco, and then the Galapagos, as one of your
nice,
fans
Conrad.
mentioned. Yeah, that's a tough one to
Yeah.
get to. So I've always wanted to go there. Um, I had never been to mainland China. I've always wanted to see it, but I've been to like Hong Kong and Taiwan, which is kind of like China light, but it's not actual the mainland China. And Russia was on that list, but it's looked like that's going to have to wait for a while.
Yeah.
As is a lot of stuff in the Middle East. Egypt might have to wait a little bit. The Red Sea is not really one of the places I'm looking to go to at the moment.
Right.
Um, but and I always tell people it's just like, look, first time I left the country was in '89, and I went to Europe, and at that time there was two Germanys, there was a Yugoslavia, a Czechoslovakia. I
Kidding.
went
Wow.
through the Berlin Wall at Checkpoint Charlie. Um, things change quick. People think it was so long
Right.
ago, but it's not. So, and there's a couple of countries there like Myanmar that I've always wanted to go to that was only really open for like a short window, and I missed that window. For a couple of years they were opening up to tourists, and now like the military junta kind of took it back, and it's closed again. But I've heard amazing things about it. But I've just you just never know. So and I went to Cuba when it was a little easier to get to. I still
Oh,
snuck
nice.
in.
You took
But
a boat
yeah,
to Cuba.
yeah, well, I had to like fly in through Cancun. You didn't hear this from me though. This is like
No, Conrad, we're, recording this, right? Take 'em out.
right.
Uh,
But it was
It's
fascinating. Cuba is like really fascinating.
it's funny you use the word "junta," which is spelled Junta, and I remember a classmate of mine in high school was reading, and he said "junta" because he missed the lesson the day before, where the rest of us learned how to pronounce it.
Was
Oh,
it?
so
Was it? Who's Jeff Bezos' wife now?
that
Was it Lauren Sanchez?
yeah, Lauren Sanchez.
Okay, was it you that you were telling me you were watching when she was on the news out here? She said Marine Corps.
I think that's true. I forgot. Yeah, come on. Maybe she meant corporations, or she thought that's what I don't know. Yeah. That's hilarious. So tell people how they can find Travel Tales, the podcast.
We're on wherever you get your podcasts, and I'm at Travel Tales Podcast on Instagram. It's probably the best way to find us. But wherever you get your podcasts, listen up and sign up. We have new guests all the time. We got to get you back on there to talk Wisconsin, buddy.
Yeah, I've been 3 places: Chicago, Wisconsin, and LA. I've been all over America, but I haven't. Oh, in Montreal. I was in Montreal and Winnipeg. I was
Oh
supposed to go
wow.
to British Columbia once, but that got canceled. But Montreal was
Oh,
about as international as I got, I guess.
I love Montreal. Vancouver's one of my
Yeah, it was
favorite
cool.
cities in North America. Vancouver's great. And I just went to Montreal. That was another one that was on my list. I had never been to Toronto
Oh,
up
really?
until a few months ago. It's
Oh,
like
no kidding.
the biggest city in Canada. I've been to like all around the Maritime Islands. I've been to like Prince Edward Island. I've been to Halifax. I've been all around there, and I've been up to like the Yukon territory, and hadn't been to Toronto. It's just I had no reason to go. But then we just took a long weekend and went. We were out in Washington D.C. My girlfriend and I, and then we said, you know what, let's swing by Toronto in September. Went to a Blue Jays game. It was fun. Did
Huh.
all touristy stuff. Went up to the big tower. I loved it. It had a real Chicago vibe to it, which I know is a
Really?
bad thing to say in Wisconsin, but I
We
should say I
love
was
our
born in
Chicago.
Wisconsin. I was born in
Yeah.
Wisconsin. I can say
Yes, you can say that. Yeah, so was Heather Graham, but,
that. Was she really?
um yeah, she was. It was her birthday yesterday. I had Brian Edding on to talk about Heather Graham because he did a movie with her. So I'm trying to do these little fun things where, like, if I know a weird tidbit or something like, on Jennifer Beals' birthday, I had Pete Moore on the show for a few minutes because he kissed
Oh,
her
great.
in a
Oh, that's
play.
right.
Yeah, so Pete told us that story. So all these little stories, all this knowledge I have in my head, I gotta find a way to use it somehow. Um, Mike, you know what? Okay, so we'll talk more when we come back. Coming up next, I want to ask you where the best place you've been is. So you just
Oh,
told us
that's
where we
hard.
could find the travel, and then I want to talk to you about the BoDeans concert we saw in Indianapolis
Oh my gosh.
and that night, which is one of the longest of my life. And we'll talk about that with Mike Siegel. Uh, this is Pete Schwaba. You're listening to Nightlight on the Civic Media Radio Network. It's Nightlight with Pete Schwaba. We're broadcasting statewide from City Deck Landing in Green Bay at our WGBW studios. Here are some texts we just got about Conrad's mom. I think I said that would do an around the world cruise from the 920. Jim from Appleton. I would go to Australia if money was not an issue. Well done. We'll ask Mike about that too. And then Conrad's mom, 920. If I could afford it, I would have to come back for work. Yeah, this is Paula. This is money is no object. So you guys can go wherever you want. And Jim, Mike, what do you tell Jim about Australia?
I just got back. I was
Oh,
there
that's
over the
right.
holidays. I was working on a cruise ship that dropped me off in Sydney on December 23rd, so I decided to stay there through the holidays, and my girlfriend flew out and she met me out there, so we stayed there through New Year's Eve, and it was great because New Year's Eve in Sydney is like world famous. They blow off fireworks all over the Sydney Harbor and off the Sydney Harbor Bridge and everything else. And it's summer down there, so it's really warm. And Sydney is and Australia in general. I mean, you're talking about a country that's it's the size of America in terms of land. I mean, it's huge. And whereas we have about 40 million, 345 or whatever we're up to now,
Yeah.
they have like 25 million people. There's no one there. So
Wow.
you see these amazing like beach towns and things like that in America would just be, overrun with houses and condos and hotels and it's still kind of small and chill and it's great. It's yeah.
Now, is
I
that
love
affordable?
Australia.
Is that affordable? If someone wanted to move there or relocate, could they? Is it
It's hard to immigrate there, to
okay?
relocate. They're very
They
picky
don't
about who
want
they
more
let
people.
in. That's one of the reasons there's few people. They've been picky over the years about who they let in. So it's getting there is not easy. The best way to do it is to marry an Australian,
Okay.
really. But no, it's a great place to live. It's just getting in. Really, it's a great place to visit too. And now the dollar, the U.S. dollar, goes a long way. We were getting about $1.50 Australian to $1 US, so that was great. And there's no tipping,
Wow.
which what a
No
relief
tipping.
that is. Yeah. Oh, it's great.
So I could buy a sweater at the TJ Maxx in Australia and not have to tip the person working behind the counter. Wow, that sounds
Exactly.
really that's
And yeah, I never got cash. Everything's like touchless, like on your card. Boop boop
oh,
boop. You just
very nice.
Yeah, I never had to get cash, and even the subways, you just tap your card
All
and you
right, Jim,
go.
there you go. That's I think you should
Yeah.
save
The
for,
big thing is the flight. I mean, it's a hell of a flight, but,
oh, yeah.
once you get there, it's for anybody looking to travel and Americans, I always say that was my first solo trip in '96 was to Australia, and it's just easy because there's no language barrier. It's culturally, it's not that different from here,
Right.
so it's easy to get around, and it's just and you just get if you drive, just you're driving on the other side of the road. That's the only thing you gotta remember.
Yeah. And you could get a Greyhound bus, ticket there for like 120 bucks, which is pretty
That
good.
that's how I got around the first time. I just
Oh,
took
when
it
you were
around.
there. Oh,
Yeah,
okay. Oh, nice.
'96. Not this time. No.
Yeah. Oh, that's pretty cool. So
Yeah.
you've done stand up on cruises too. And one of the texts, Conrad's mom, who texts every night, and she's awesome, said she would take a cruise. Um, how is that, Mike? Let's transition from travel to comedy,
Okay.
and cruise ships are the perfect way to do it. How do you like working cruise ships?
Well, I've been doing them since about 2015, 2016, and they found me. There was an agent in Miami that saw me on Last Comic Standing on NBC.
Oh
I
yeah.
was on the last season of that, and then he called me up and he was like, "Hey, you ever think of doing cruises?" And I was like, "Well, not till I was 70." you know, because that traditionally that was the way it worked. That was kind of like the end of your
Yeah.
career, but they've kind of changed in that. I mean, there's a lot more comedy on the ships now. There's a lot less club work, and the money in the clubs hasn't really gone up
Isn't that crazy?
since we started 30 years ago.
That's
So
insane.
yeah, and so um, I gave it a shot. And as someone who likes travel, it's certainly not for everybody. I mean, I'm not a cruise person in my personal life.
Right.
I just like a little more control over my vacation, and they're great if you don't want to think or do anything, do any of the
Yeah.
planning yourself. And I get some people like that, and my friends with kids really like them too, like little kids. You could just kind of like turn them loose, and then there's like a
Throw 'em
kids
overboard.
department. Yeah. And the big thing is never having to pay for food for the kids and stuff like that. I mean, that's
Yeah.
huge. So they can't really get in too much trouble on the ship.
I
So
don't know if I would like that. I feel like it would be
it
kind of
ain't
a
for
hostage
everybody. And
situation.
for
Yeah.
comedy, it's a big switch because you had to be. Now I don't do like Carnival, which I guess they have uh, like a dedicated comedy club where you work with a couple other acts, and they can be pretty loose with the subject matter and language. But on most of the ones, and the ones I've been doing, you got to be pretty squeaky. There's no, politics. There's no swearing. There's no,
See, that
sexual
sounds fun.
stuff. And well, if you're used to clubs, and I mean, there's rules, and a
How
lot
about
of
sex,
comics
folks? What do you guys think about sex? Anybody here like sex?
and a lot of guys don't like it. And
Yeah.
also, I mean, a lot of the shows would be all ages. So, I mean, that's the hardest thing. You get like an 80-year-old sitting next to a 10-year-old and
And
everything in
you
between. And it's like, well, somebody's going to be disappointed here. Probably both of you.
I love the story. And this happened to someone we know. We won't say the name, obviously, but if you bomb on a cruise ship, man, there is nowhere to go. And
Yeah.
he did not do well. In fact, the audience hated him so much so the cruise line chartered a helicopter to come and take him off the ship so that the people on the ship didn't have to
Wow.
see him. So
Like
I thought you
oh,
heard that
wow.
story.
No, I've been there with guys that they've let them off at the next port where they were supposed to be on for
Ooh,
like a second week, and they're just like, we're good. You can leave.
why don't you rent a
That
bike and
Yeah, that
get your
happened to a good friend of ours. I'll tell you after the
yeah, please.
but
Um,
to
so
helicopter someone off is expensive, so they must have
oh,
really hated him.
they could have sunk the whole business.
Yeah.
How'd the ship go? Well, they're out of business now, so not too well. Um, so you and I, Mike, and we went to a BoDeans concert, great Wisconsin band in Indianapolis.
Yes, we did. One of your favorite bands at that time, and I don't know if
Yeah.
it still
Oh, they
is.
still are. They're great. I love the BoDeans. You know what? I'm gonna put a pin in this. And then I want to ask you about wiffle ball.
Okay.
Some of our fun LA fun. It was great. We had so much fun. But back in the day when we worked Wisconsin a lot as stand-ups, we did take a little road trip to Indianapolis, and we'll talk about that next. He's Mike Siegel. He's the host of If Walls Could Talk and What You Get for the Money and Movie Break and all kinds of stuff. And it's the Travel Tales podcast. This is Pete Schwaba. You're listening to Nightlight on the Civic Media Radio Network. This is National Plan a Trip Day. From the 818 Bridget says, I would stay at the Grand Hotel on Mackinaw Island for a month. That is a good one. I've been there. I went there on my honeymoon just for a week. Mike, that's like the Grand Hotel is like a cruise ship. It's like this all-inclusive. The grounds are beautiful. There's golf, swimming, tennis, and you never have to leave, and everything's included. You got to wear a coat to dinner. It's like really old school. I don't know if you
I
ever
know
been.
all about it, but I've never been. Can you believe that? I mean, I've driven
Cool.
through it. Driven around it. I've worked up. When we were
Yeah.
doing stand up, I did Sault Ste. Marie. I did all
Oh, yeah.
around the UP. I did Upper Michigan and Traverse City and all that stuff. But I just never went to Mackinac Island.
There are no cars allowed. You can it smells like horse manure at times because there's horses everywhere.
Sold.
Horse I'm sure there's a fetish for that somewhere. There's but it's just gorgeous. It's got this energy I can't even describe. It's so much fun. We've taken our kids there a few times. Put it on your list, buddy. That's a
I
good one.
will. No, it's a famous place.
And I'll come with you. Okay, so here's my story. Mike and I went to a BoDeans concert at the time, and this is why we did this, Mike. It's all coming back to me now. There was a time in the early 90s when the BoDeans were like U2 in Chicago. Like,
Well, yeah, in the Midwest, they were, Wisconsin
huge.
band, but I remember WXRT in Chicago, which we all listened to, and was a great, and probably still is a great radio station. Loved them and played the
Yeah.
hell out of them, and so they were huge in Chicago. They had a massive following in Chicago, so they seemed to play there all the time. And why didn't we see them there where we lived, and rather than drive 3 hours to
Well,
Indy?
that's what I was getting to. They played bigger venues in Chicago, but in Indianapolis, they were playing the Vogue Theater in Carmel or somewhere. We have another friend, Dave Dugan, who's a comedian, very funny comic, who's an Indianapolis guy. And Mike and I planned it. We were going to go down on a road trip down, see the BoDeans, crash at Dave's house. He lived like a mile from the club.
Yeah, the Vogue was in Broad Ripple, I believe, because the
Broad
comedy
Ripple.
club was right next to it. I saw the Ramones in that place on their last tour.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, I was doing the club next door, and we just walked next door after our show, and I saw them. I didn't know it was going to be their last tour, but it turned out to be. Yeah.
Did you use the old "We're the comedians" line? That's a big thing in stand-up. For those of you listening, comics will use that to get in anywhere. Hi, we're the comedians.
Oh,
next door.
we're the comics.
Yeah, we're the comics. Like it's like you're with the FBI or something. But sometimes it works. People are like, oh, that's so cool.
Oh, you're the comics. Yeah, come on in.
Yeah, right.
You got to give it a shot.
Mike and I went to this show. We ended up staying at the place drinking till like 3 a.m. A lot of people from the show were there. I remember it was a really fun night. We were just messing with people and having fun and whatever. And it's 3 o'clock in the morning, and you kind of wanted to just go home. But
yeah, well, we could, we were young and we could have made it back. It was probably midnight or so, and we could have made it back.
no, it was later than midnight.
Oh, really?
In fact, I can tell you it was much later than midnight because, all right, well, here's what happened. We drove to Dave's house. Dave gave up on us. He just figured we weren't coming. So around 2 a.m., he locked the door, and we couldn't get into Dave's house. And Dave apparently, and rudely, is a very heavy sleeper. So Mike and I are locked out of our friend Dave Dugan's house. He has one of those little doggy doors. We couldn't fit in that. We even tried to get in there. It's like it's snow. And that's the other thing. It was snowing. It was like a blizzard.
Let's paint the picture of the weather conditions at that point. It was
awful.
like really blowing, and then it started coming down really hard.
And
then we went down there without a cut set place to stay. We didn't have a hotel room.
We had Dave's house. We had it planned, Mike.
Oh, you think we would have? This is pre-cell phone too. People don't realize this, so we couldn't just call him and ask for a text or anything like that. So we're pounding on his door, at 2 in the morning.
I think I
Nothing.
had a beeper, but that only comes in handy if someone calls you
Right.
and you can get to a payphone. So we get to Dave's house. We're locked out. We're like, I go, should we get a hotel? And Mike's like, come on, we can do this. And I know it was probably 2 in the morning because we start back for Chicago in this blizzard on I-65. We had both been drinking. Luckily, we could only go like 10 miles an hour. So even if
Yeah.
we got an accident, it's like a fender bend. It's like a bump, but it was horrible. And somehow we stayed awake. We probably talked about The Simpsons for 3.5, 5 hours, whatever it was. And we got to your
Lately.
mom's place in Oak Park and it was light out. So it was morning. But here's the funniest part of the story. Mike and I tried to get to a gas station to call Dave to
Oh,
open the
right.
door. So, I can't see. I've had cocktails. The snow's coming down. I make a left-hand turn to get into this gas station, and my Civic goes up on the median strip, and the wheels are like going, we're not touching the ground. So now I go, the cops are going to come and bail us out. They're going to see we've been drinking. I'm going to get a DUI. It was horrible, but it was a very fun night in retrospect. A lot of fun.
And then you're in front, and you're like, we thought it couldn't get any worse. And then what happened when you look back to me in the car when you were trying to dig out the wheels? You
Oh,
remember?
no, tell me. I do remember
No,
something.
you were like, "Oh, this is terrible. We're gonna be, right at the point where we're gonna get really angry with each other." You looked over, and I'm just howling, laughing, watching you in the warm car, watching you try to dig the wheels out.
Yeah, don't worry, Mike. I got it. I don't even know how we got the car off the.
I don't either. I
Uh,
really don't.
that was
Yeah,
a,
that was it. Just the dumb things you do in youth, and also it's like now you think about, hey, let's just we'll grab a hotel room or whatever. We didn't have
yeah.
any money, so just like we needed that $75 or whatever.
We could get a Super 8. Who's got $30? Like,
Right.
what are you crazy? Oh, that's funny.
That would kill us at this point. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Just like no way. But
What?
thank God there was nobody else. Everybody with sense was off the road, so we didn't have any problem about running into anyone.
Yeah, and that's really what kind of did it. We were going so slow. It's like, okay. And I think we probably got coffee at that awful gas station. And
My
we-
rule in stand up was always like if I could make it home by 4 in the morning when I lived in Chicago, because we
yeah,
had it timed out to every gig. Like St. Louis was about 4.5 hours away. Green Bay, I can make it about 3.5.
right,
Indy was 3. Detroit was about 4.5.
right.
So after you finished your set, okay, you looked at your watch and go, if I leave now,
I can lose
anything to
my own
sleep in your
bed.
own bed.
Yeah.
And I think I pulled over twice, and both was coming back from Wisconsin.
Oh,
Uh,
really?
yeah, I tried to make it back from Green Bay after staying way too long, having cocktails, again, having drinks with people and just
Right.
keep looking at my watch and going, I should take off. I meant, and I finally had to pull over somewhere around Kenosha with the light coming up, and I couldn't stay awake anymore.
It's funny. All the people in Wisconsin complain about Illinois. It's this kind of fun rivalry. But you're right. People from Illinois always felt targeted by Wisconsin cops. But when I went, I always had Wisconsin plates. Even though I was a transplant here, it was cheaper to register my car here.
Oh yeah, totally.
So I used my parents' address, even though I had an apartment in Chicago.
I remember that.
Yeah, I got pulled over in Chicago, and the Chicago cops, and I'm like, how do I get out of this? Do I say I'm not really from Wisconsin, or do I just say, oh, I am from Wisconsin. I'm new to this neighborhood. Like,
Yeah.
what can I put over on them? But they were really cool, and they just said, you know what? We're gonna let you off, but when you go back to Wisconsin, tell them we're not so bad down here in Chicago. That's what the cop said to me. I was like,
That's what he said.
yeah,
That's great.
save me
And then you gave him his bribe, and then you went on your way.
no, I gave him the finger and I sped off. So it worked out really well. Spending some time here with Mike Siegel. We didn't even get to all your credits, Mike. You get so many credits. What was
Oh,
let's just keep it on stand up. What was your
okay.
favorite club to work?
Looking back, I mean, a few of them were in our area. I mean, there was some places when I'm asked that people would, they always think it's going to be the Improv or something like that in Hollywood, and it's not. The best clubs I found were like I remember the old Comedy Cafe in Milwaukee was one of my favorite places to go.
Great club.
Acme in Minneapolis is still there, and it's still one of the best rooms in the country. Yeah, places like that, and there's like things like the Treehouse in Bloomington, Indiana, something like that. You would never,
Wow.
but the crowds are great, and a lot of them has to do with people, the club owners who just cultivate a good crowd that knows
Yeah.
comedy and loves comedy. The club owners that just try to get bodies in there and not care who they book. Um, then that breeds, a bad crowd.
Right.
But if they really bring in good comics and thinking, good intellectual comics, but a mix, there's room for
Sure.
everything. But you can tell the club owners that really love comedy and the ones that are just trying to make a buck, and
Right.
the ones that are run and police the room. If people are acting up, like the Comedy and Magic Club here in Hermosa Beach is also one of my favorites. They just bring in a good crowd, and the people behave. You rarely get like heckles or drunks or that
Oh,
kind of
that's
thing.
so great.
So that makes it for the best. Yeah, some of those
Um,
rooms are the best. What do you remember?
yeah, I agree. Comedy Cafe, I loved in Milwaukee. I couldn't believe what a great room that was. And I always liked working Madison because I love the city of Madison. But I
Oh
remember
yeah,
the
I remember
club
that
there was
too.
just okay. It's a different club now. The Comedy on State is supposed to be a great room.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
The room we worked was closer to the Capitol on State Street, and it was an okay room, but it wasn't great. But the Comedy Cafe, I liked Wits End in Denver.
Oh yeah,
Pittsburgh,
that was
Pittsburgh Funny
well.
Bone was good. The clubs I worked in Tampa and West Palm were great. The Comedy Corner.
Yeah, the Comedy
Um,
Works in Denver is a famous club, and that's really a great room. And it's still there as well. And, if a club's been open for like 25, 30 years, they're doing something right. You know what I
yeah, for
mean?
sure. So it's funny you say that too about driving because I remember I remember I left Tampa and I thought, all right, I'm just gonna drive. I'm gonna see
You
how
could have
far I
driven, wow, from
I decided
Tampa.
yeah, because I went to Pennsylvania, then I went all the way down the East Coast, stopped in North Carolina to see relatives. I worked with Billy Gardell in
Yeah.
Pennsylvania. I ended up going down to Florida and working a couple weeks there, and I decided to drive home. I thought I'll make this a little tour. So I leave Tampa, I have dinner, and I keep going. And it's deceptive because you get to Indiana in like 10 or 12 hours, but you still have 6 hours or 5 hours to go to Chicago. And I
Yeah.
thought, I can't get a hotel in the state that's right next to the city I live in. So I kept going. I drove 19 straight hours. I was on the Dan Ryan Expressway and I saw a motorcycle entering the freeway. And I just saw the helmet because the rest of it was blocked. And I thought it was a turkey running across the highway. Like that's how insane I was. Um, Mike, I got a couple more questions for you.
Okay.
We're going to see what you're up to next, and then we're going to bring in our next guest, a guy from Milwaukee. Mike Kauth is going to join us from Comedy Sports. We're going to learn about that. But right now, I'm talking to Mike Siegel. It's Pete Schwaba and Nightlight on the Civic Media Radio Network. Got a few more minutes here with If Walls Could Talk host Mike Siegel and what you get for your money. Now, we did cover your shows last week, Mike, but we've been kind of focusing on stand-up comedy. So we'll have to have you back again at some point to talk more about TV. But I want to ask you, uh, you had a development deal when
I
we moved.
did.
I moved to LA a year before you. We were both at the Montreal Comedy Festival. I was doing cartwheels to try to get people to notice me, and you walked away with a development deal and a lot of money. So I was very happy for you. What I think a lot of people, I don't think this is too inside because of Seinfeld and people see what the process was like. I think they extended the deal too, but that must have been a really
Yeah.
cool experience for you. Talk a little bit about what that was like and how close you were to actually having your own show.
Yeah, it was a little, so this is 97. So that's when I went out to LA, and you had all these meetings. I remember before I went out there, I had like 12 meetings in a week after Montreal, and it ended up being, we ended up getting a deal with NBC. I got one, and they called it a development deal, but they never really developed anything for me. It was more of like a glorified holding deal. And you learn about Hollywood. A lot of like when they sign people is to keep other people from signing you.
Isn't that
You know
great?
what I mean? They'll sit down with you and they go, who are you talking to? And you better have an answer.
Yeah.
They want to know that you're talking to other people.
Just my mom on a
And
weekly basis.
yeah, it's like, so we got to lock this guy up.
She's
Um, and yeah, so funny thing about that one, I remember. So the first thing, so we're going through pilot season, and I'm under contract, so I'd be reading for these sitcoms that are coming out. And with pilot shows, 90% of them never see the light of day. You don't know what's happening. Even back then, now it's even more, hardly any get on air. But
right.
I remember the first script I got was for a new show that was coming out, and it was for the lead, and it was to play a gay character. And my manager at the time thought, you know what, right out of the box, you probably shouldn't go for that one. So I didn't read for it. And that was the only one that went on the air and lasted. And that was Will and Grace. So it started well, is what I'm
You don't
saying.
need that kind of
You
money,
don't
buddy. Don't worry about it. We got something else here for you. I got you a walk-on a VH1 show.
Yeah, so I
So
ended up doing, like, some little small parts on a pilot that didn't get picked up. Ended up hosting, like, a hidden camera thing, which was, like, punked before, reality TV was really on networks, and they were like, "Ah, this has no place on our network." And then a few years later, it's all reality shows, that kinda thing. So it's a typical Hollywood story, and,
that's
most things don't go places, they
yeah.
don't. But, it was
Cool
an amazing
experience, though.
experience. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Um, so we just have another minute or two, Mike. If you could host, pardon me, host, write, act, or do stand up, what would you choose if money was no object?
Um, I guess the dream of mine was always to, like, host the, Tonight Show and things like that. So, I mean, I, they always say in comedy, you don't wanna be too good an MC because they'll keep you at MC,
Right.
and they'll never move you up. But, I mean, there is a skill to it, and a skill to
Oh, for
hosting
sure.
things and keeping shows moving, and being able to work with a lot of different kinds of people, and interview a lot of different kinds of people. So I was really good with that. So I always wanted to be that kind of, you know, take over. I wanted to be what Jimmy Kimmel had, and Fallon, but they got those gigs. So I mean, there's only so many of them to go around. But that would have been my ultimate dream, to, like, the host. I wanted to be Letterman, which I think a lot of people our generation did.
Yeah, it's funny. There's like 5 guys that
Right.
get
I
to do
mean,
that, and I think you're doing okay with all the shows you've hosted, and
no,
you
I was
know.
very fortunate. My first job I ever got was a VH1, so I was a VJ,
Oh
which
yeah, that's
which
right.
that was a thing.
Yeah,
But that
yeah.
was the first gig I ever got in TV when I lived in New York, and I got plenty of stories from that, so we can we can talk about
Um,
that another time.
we've both been fooling people for a long time, so keep up the good work, buddy.
Ah,
And
thanks.
by the way, you sent me an Onion headline. I'm not sure I can read, but I am going to share. I'm going
Okay,
to find
good.
out, and then I'll give you credit tomorrow. But the other one I love is man has bathing suit that's touched his penis. You can borrow.
Yeah.
I remember the picture. The guy's looking up with a big smile.
Can I just
Ah,
say my favorite,
great.
Onion photo?
Yeah.
The fun headline, since it's, an election year, the guy walking out of the voting booth, and his hair's all disheveled, and he's got one eye half open, one eye, and he's clearly, like, way into the bag, and and then it just says, and he's wearing a Ralph Nader T-shirt, and underneath there just says, "Vote, comma, voter, wasted."
That's
Vote,
great.
voter, wasted.
Mike Siegel, ladies and gentlemen, check out the Travel Tales podcast, and you can find out he has great guests, and you can find out all the places he's been and the places
Yeah.
you'll go. Thanks so much, Mike.
Uh,
We'll do it again
thanks.
soon.
Thanks, Pete, and it's great to
You,
see you.
yeah, you too, buddy.